Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Hi, I'm Dave Patterson with a Liberty Nation news break. At a recent Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, Senator Pete Ricketts, Republican from Nebraska, questioned Ambassador Marshall Billingsley, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, regarding a new world nuclear order, and asked whether the United States should extend the current Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty set to expire in February. Let's listen to a bit of the exchange.
For the first time, the United States is facing two peer nuclear powers. That's the first time in our history we've had to do that. Is right? That right?
That's right.
And so when we're talking about the New START Treaty and whether or not to extend it for a year, is there any incentive right now for Communist China to limit themselves in any way? Do you see is there any way that they would have an incentive to do that?
No, and in fact, we take any potential further pressure off of them if we simply extend the New START Treaty for another year. We're kicking the can down the road by perpetuating a bipolar Cold War construct that makes no sense in a world where there are three peer nuclear adversaries.
By extending the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty with limits on strategic nuclear weapons with just Russia, we leave out China, a dangerous idea since China is rapidly reaching parity with the United States in nuclear weapons. I'm Dave Patterson. For more on this story and others, check out Liberty Nation News at libertynation.com.
Welcome back to More War Mondays. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, creating the conditions for peace in a tripolar nuclear world is a task the new national security strategy sets out to do. And folks, the world is shifting under our feet faster than ever, though. You just watched that clip laying out the new reality. We're no longer in a bipolar Cold War world. It's a tripolar nuclear standoff with the United States, Russia, and a rapidly arming China. All of us holding cards that could end civilization. Senator Ricketts nailed it. Any arms control talk that ignores China's buildup is living in the past. That's why I want to highlight a really good piece article from our friend David Pine that's making the rounds. He argues the only sane path to avoid World War III is a return to clear spheres of influence. I know you haven't heard that, but this is like the old Yalta model, but reversed and updated for today's environment. Let Russia secure its traditional border regions without NATO creeping eastward any more than it already has. Let China dominate its near abroad in Asia without us poking the Taiwan bear unnecessarily. And in return, we reassert unquestioned American dominance in our own backyard. The entire Western hemisphere under revived Monroe Doctrine. And we are. No more Chinese bases in Venezuela, no Russian ops in Cuba, no Iranian proxies coming to our neighborhood to create havoc, period. Think about it. We stop bleeding treasure and lives in endless European entanglements, pull back from overcommitted alliances like NATO that drag us into fights that aren't ours, and focus on securing our hemisphere. You know, Greenland, the Arctic, the Caribbean, all of it. And meanwhile, Ukraine gets neutralized as an issue. Iran faces real pressure without full Russian or Chinese backup, and we can deter Beijing's naval ambitions by showing strength where it matters for most, right here at home. This isn't retreat, it's realism, and really it's got to be done. It's America first in a dangerous tripolar world, and all this is why my guest today to discuss it is national security strategist and author of this great article, David Pine. David's a former U.S. Army Combat Arms and Headquarters Staff officer who oversaw armaments cooperation with the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. He currently serves as president of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. David, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's a great article, man.
Hey, Rob, great to be with you, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. The nuclear piece is the real uh, tipping point here. I continue to believe that our intelligence agencies are are not emphasizing the truth about China's nuclear buildup. I think we continually and purposefully underestimate it, even to our own leadership in a classified setting, uh, in order to not make the reality of what is be known, and that is that China has expanded their nuclear arsenal to where they are nearly a peer competitor with the United States now, like the Soviet Union is in the nuclear sphere. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're absolutely right. Based on my estimates, I think that the U.S. intelligence has consistently underestimated the size of China's nuclear arsenal by a factor of 4 or more. They currently estimate that China has about 600 nuclear weapons. I think it's closer to 4,000. Actually, I mean, we've had articles. Dr. Peter Pry, I think, in 2021, before his untimely death, wrote an article at the Center for Security Policy stating exactly that. And we've had others, myself and Peter Huisi, who is one of our top nuclear experts here in the U.S., who have also stated that. So whether it's 4,000 right now or 2,000, they are likely superior in terms of numbers and operationally, in terms of our operational nuclear warheads. The U.S., we keep using Federation of American Scientists numbers. The Congress uses them that show us around 5,000 nuclear weapons. In fact, it's close. It's really about 2,285, I think, is the number that I've worked out with Peter in terms of what's actually operational, and that includes active and reserve warheads. We have about 1,500 that are partially dismantled that could be returned to active service within a 24-month period following a presidential order. And then the rest are really just nuclear plutonium pits. So not even warheads at all. We'd have to design new warheads around them. So, and as you're aware, as one of our top nuclear experts, we are really struggling to try to get those nuclear warhead production lines back into business. We used to produce thousands, several thousand, I think, a year. Russia can currently produce 3,000 a year. China probably in the hundreds. The U.S. is struggling to reach our goal of 80 right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you on the stockpile issue. The We have a need to not just refurbish the existing warheads and nuclear physics packages, especially the weapons that use them need to be refurbished because there are all kinds of materials that deteriorate inside these weapons where the weapons basically have to be taken apart and remanufactured to replace those materials that have worn or have lost their whatever it is. I mean, everything from bakelite to different metals and different types of chemical materials have to be looked at, assessed, and you can't do that without a production line, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we were the premier nuclear power in the world from 1945 until probably the early 1970s with the SALT I Treaty and the ABM Treaty, which kind of locked in what would become nuclear inferiority by the end of the Reagan administration, at which time the Soviet Union possessed twice as many warheads as we did, with a far larger throw weight. But yeah, in terms of nuclear warhead maintenance, I mean, our nuclear infrastructure is really just critically obsolescent in a lot of ways. Not to the extent that we've lost deterrence, I think, but certainly we are approaching obsolescence with our ICBMs, Minuteman IIIs that are as many as 55, 56 years old. B-52s obviously first deployed, I think, in 55 or 58. So those airframes, amazingly resilient, but they are, bordering on obsolescent. Obviously, our B-2s are modern, our B-1s are modern. We should renuclearize the B-1 bombers, in my opinion. We should go back on 24-hour strip alert to make sure that our air leg is survivable. In many ways, I don't think I worry that it isn't. Obviously, a nuclear first strike would destroy the vast number of our bombers on the ground unless they were already airborne. Yeah, this is a critically important area because there's really nothing else that matters. When it comes to deterrence, deterring our nuclear superpowers enemies, Russia and China, who are closely allied together from attacking us, or our allies. It's really the America's, principally our nuclear strategic triad, which is solely capable of doing that. And so we took a gamble by, unilaterally disarming our nuclear arsenal to the extent that we did following the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Whereas, the Russians really retained a far larger percentage of their nuclear warheads than we did. And according to, one leaked Ukrainian estimate, top secret estimate on the size of Russia's nuclear arsenal, they may have as many as 16,000 warheads. And I'm betting that most of those, perhaps all of them, are operational, including about 6,000 strategic nuclear warheads. So that's nearly a 3-to-1 advantage over us. Throw in the Chinese, even if they only are matching us with parity, that's gets to be like 4 to 5 times as many nuclear warheads as we have. And while certainly there are 3 nuclear peer adversaries, I continue to believe that we do live in a bipolar international order because we have the U.S. Western-led alliance consisting of NATO, Japan, and South Korea, and the Philippines, and other allies on one side, and then the Sino-Russian alliance on the other.
We got to take a commercial break. Then when we come back, we'll see another clip. And that one we'll be talking about Europe and NATO and those kind of things. But I want to continue this discussion on the nuclear posture and the nuclear stockpile and the force itself, because there are some things that are supposed to be happening. I want to get your take on whether they are or not. We'll be right back with David Pine.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and my guest today is former U.S. Army staff officer and a man that's been working in weapons control areas and those kinds of things for many, many, many years, and is a strategic expert on national military strategy, foreign policy, and national security strategy. David Pine. David, we were talking about the nuclear arsenal before, and you mentioned that some folks think that Russia has 16,000 nuclear weapons. Now, the advertised numbers for each of us is a little over 5,000. But we never really paid much attention to what some folks call tactical nuclear weapons, artillery shells, bombs, non huge megaton type bombs that would be delivered by fighter size aircraft. But we have a capability there to deter their use of that. And what Vance just said in that little clip there about being concerned about internal security of these European nations has my very close attention as someone who has worked the NATO Nuclear Command and Control and the NATO nuclear mission before. And I think we should be very concerned as we pay attention to what's going on inside these countries, too, in addition to making sure that there's a deterrent factor for the Russians to not use nuclear weapons. What's the bigger danger?
Well, I think you raised a good point. I think I've heard you raise it before on your show, and that is that Britain and France are becoming Islamicized essentially. They're welcoming in lots of Muslim immigrants, just like we're welcoming a lot of Latino immigrants. But the security threat, obviously, to Muslim immigrants is much higher than, of course, our neighbors from the south. But yeah, you raise a great point. So Russia has anywhere from 5 to 10,000 non-strategic nuclear weapons. The U.S. has a total of 200, and that includes about 100 to 150, which are in our active arsenal, and then the rest in reserve. So we once had 7,000 nuclear weapons deployed in Europe alone, 7,200 actually, and 1,500 on Taiwan. We currently have 100 to 150 located in Europe, and then we have, that's not counting our B-52s, which some of which we forward deployed to the UK. So that might add a little bit, a few more. But then we have really no non-strategic warheads to speak of deployed in the Far East or Western Pacific against what is supposed to be our #1 pacing threat, both in terms of nuclear and conventional forces. So we've heard since Barack Obama's presidency that we're supposed to pivot to Asia. But under both Biden and Trump, there's been an increased focus in Europe. Obviously, Trump is beginning to reverse that commendably with the withdrawal of a U.S. Army brigade from Romania and deploying, of course, 25% of our deployed naval assets to Venezuela, and now kind of reversing course and going the wrong direction by deploying a large armada to Iran for potential regional war with Iran that could last weeks or months, or it could be decided very quickly if Iran decides to use cyber or super EMP weapons against the U.S., which we could, of course, retaliate to and cause massive worldwide destruction.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Do you agree that we're working from a position from behind? We're trying to catch back up so that we can make sure deterrence holds against the Chinese, especially, and that nuclear deterrence continues to hold over Europe. And there's some new weapon systems in the mix. The Sentinel ICBM is supposed to be being in production to be fielded. The B-21 bomber, the Raider, is out there. That's nuclear capable, strategic type bomber too. That's coming down the pipeline and everything. But if our manufacturing production lines are in as bad a shape as we know they are, what is the likelihood that we'll be able to get to and exceed our timelines on that, which is something clearly we need to do when it comes to not just fielding new weapon systems on the nuclear force side, but to also look at a new nuclear posture shift. You mentioned putting bombers back on strategic alert in the last segment. Those are things that are being recommended by folks like at the National Institute for Deterrence Studies, who issued a request for a new nuclear posture review that has, as far as I know, gone unanswered.
Yeah, I think we are working from from a position of nuclear inferiority, and of course we had nuclear supremacy as recently as the 1960s over the Soviets, and perhaps even in the early 70s. when during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had an estimated 5 to 9 times as many strategic nuclear warheads as the Soviets did. So, I mean, that's really hard to imagine. You know, we won the Cold War in part, not totally, of course, through maintaining a nuclear edge over the Soviets, and they certainly during the Reagan administration they were able to exceed us while Reagan modernized and you know, strengthened our nuclear deterrent, which at the time was very strong. You know, we had 10 to 11,000 strategic nuclear warheads. Today we have, you know, again about 2,200. You know, if Trump wants to be a new Reagan peace through strength president, you know, one of the key portions of that is nuclear strength, not conventional military strength, but you know, both strategic nuclear and theater nuclear firepower that we can use to deter our enemies, principally China. You know, I would argue that Russia, you and I have discussed how strengthening ties with Russia and India could, you know, break up the Sino-Russian military alliance and make China think twice about, you know, attacking their neighbors in, you know, like such as Taiwan, but more importantly, Japan and South Korea and the Philippines and Australia, you know, so that they won't, they'll know that Russia won't have their back. And I think that's a critical component of the strategic equation moving forward, is that we have a true tripolar international order that's not, you know, two Cold War type era alliances, but rather the U.S., Russia, and China, where neither one of those three powers are in fact allied with each other.
Yeah. In the short term, what can we do? I mean, you mentioned the reserve stockpile. We have operational warheads, we have backup warheads, and then we have a reserve stockpile that are warheads in various stages of decommissioning, many of which are probably still intact as they wait their turn in the line to be disassembled and commissioned and everything. In the short term, what can we do? I mean, one of the things that I know that's very flexible is the Tomahawk land attack missile nuclear that we took out of all of our submarines and off of our ships. Couldn't we put some of those back in service and put them out in the Pacific on the fleet?
I think we could, yeah. And I argued for that strongly as when I was working for Vivek Ramaswamy as his defense and foreign policy advisor. He was kind of bought into the idea that if we just strengthen our conventional naval forces against China, that'll pose a stronger deterrent. Well, of course, we know from top secret leaks that you know, China can outbuild us in ships 232 to 1. So we're never going to catch up to China in terms of ships. Of course, our tonnage in the U.S. Navy reigns supreme in terms of aggregate tonnage, which I think is probably a more accurate determinant of our conventional naval strength, you know, comparatively. But yeah, renuclearizing the U.S. Navy, you know, reversing George H.W. Bush's order to you know, remove the nuclear warheads off our cruisers, destroyers, and you know, our aircraft carriers and attack submarines is really critical, because you know, the more nuclear platforms we have in the Western Pacific, including with you know, non-strategic nuclear weapons, I think that really increases the credibility of our deterrent posture against China in the Western Pacific.
Yeah, and with the numbers that we think they've been building and fielding, the numbers are important to increase the numbers and be able to address those type of targets, because we have to guarantee in their minds that they're going to get responded to in a devastating manner, right? If they launch any kind of nuclear attack on us, even an EMP attack, a nuclear weapon, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And, you know, they are building, again, they're building towards nuclear superiority. They're not looking for parity with the U.S. They want superiority, just like the Soviets did and just like the Soviets achieved over us. And, you know, they're going to, that's what they're building towards. And in my estimation, they've likely already achieved that. And that's going to put us at a disadvantage, you know, in terms of potential nuclear blackmail. Because if they reveal the true size of our nuclear arsenal, and they, you know, lay out the options for what they can do to us in terms of super EMP or cyber attack, and of course, counter space first strikes as well. I think a U.S. president would be very reluctant to risk any war with them, and wisely so, I think.
Yeah, that gets back to the opening question about the return to the spheres of influence, a reverse Yalta agreement, so to speak. What made that the Yalta agreement and the spheres of influence between China, Russia, and the United States work in the first place for the UK in the first Yalta?
Well, of course, the Yalta Agreement was, that was probably the most infamous surrender of human liberty and countries and territory in modern history. Of course, FDR and Churchill were responsible for that. We can all disagree as to how much Churchill was involved in that. Certainly, he opposed that, I think, initially, but then kind of came around to that as kind of a new foreign policy reality. But I think that the reason that worked out is because both sides respected those boundaries, so those Cold War boundaries, the so-called Iron Curtain. We never crossed those with troops or military forces aside from spy planes, and that really provided stability, provided nuclear guardrails, that we weren't going to get into a situation where there'd be a nuclear confrontation. The one time that those guardrail or those that borderline was threatened, of course, was the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Right.
when the Soviets deployed MRBMs in our hemisphere that could potentially range as far as Washington, D.C., perhaps not that far, but certainly much of the southeast United States. And President JFK, made a deal with them to withdraw all of our missiles, RBMs, from Turkey and Italy, in response for their removal of MRBMs and perhaps IRBMs from Cuba. And, I think he estimated that saved potentially 100 million lives by not engaging in military strikes and starting a nuclear war over that. But you can imagine if the U.S. was that concerned about nuclear missiles that close to us, just imagine how Russia feels. Granted, they have this massive nuclear arsenal, but if we can range Moscow, in 10 minutes from Ukraine or from Poland or the Baltics, then that needs to be a major concern of them in terms of their nuclear their leadership survivability.
Yeah, absolutely right. We've got to take another break, Dave. When we come back, we'll talk about Western Hemisphere strength and what's going on with that, and how that has an impact on these spheres of influence for China and Russia and the United States, and how that might work if we were to go fully into a new spheres of influence policy. We'll be right back with David Pine.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
Emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
Let me just say this. What is our goal going in? We had in our hemisphere a regime operated by an indicted narco-trafficker that became a base of operation for virtually every competitor, adversary, and enemy in the world. It was, for Iran, their primary spot of operation in the Western Hemisphere was Venezuela. For Russia, their primary base of operation in the Western Hemisphere, along Cuba and Nicaragua, was Venezuela. In the case of China, China was receiving oil at a huge, about $20 a barrel discount. And they weren't even paying money for it. It was being used to pay down debt that they were owed. This is the oil of the people of Venezuela, and it was being given to the Chinese as barter at a 20%, at a $20 discount per barrel in some cases. And so you had basically three of our primary opponents in the world operating from our hemisphere from that spot. It was also a place where you had a narco-trafficking regime that openly cooperated with the FARC and the ELN and other drug trafficking organizations using their national territory. It was an enormous strategic risk for the United States, not halfway around the world, not in another continent, but in the hemisphere in which we all live. And it was having dramatic impacts on us, but also on Colombia and on the Caribbean basin and all sorts of other places. It was an untenable situation, and it had to be addressed. And it was addressed. And now the question becomes what happens moving forward. As I've described to you in previous settings and in individual conversations, we had three objectives here. The final, I'll work it backwards, because the end state here is we want to reach a phase of transition where we are left with a friendly, stable, prosperous Venezuela.
Venezuela, that's the Western Hemispheric objective for the military operation that occurred and is still really occurring. Just because things are not kinetic doesn't mean there's still not a military operation happening down there. But it's not just about Venezuela. This is about what my guest today writes about in his article, that acknowledges that we're in a tripolar world of near peer or peer competitors, superpowers almost. But nobody comes close to the United States yet. But they're trying to. That's what Venezuela was all about. China, Russia, Iran, the narco terrorist drug cartels all have negative influences on America and American power and the American people in our own backyard. And this approach to getting our own house in order in the entire Western Hemisphere and putting that as the number one priority of the new national security strategy lays the groundwork to deter China and continue to deter Russia from a nuclear perspective, and preventing them from making a huge mistake and starting a kinetic war with us. And David Pine, again, is my guest today. He wrote that article about these spheres of influence. And I think the president's team and the president has made it very clear that the NSS is right. This is their number one priority, the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, and it absolutely should be. It really always should have been. What happens in the Western Hemisphere is of much greater importance than what happens half a world away. I would argue even in Taiwan, even in Iran, even in the Middle East or Eastern Europe. Certainly those Eastern Europe, I would argue, has never been a vital interest of the United States. It certainly wasn't to Winston Churchill or Ronald Reagan when they agreed to have East Germany be communist for half a century and refused to use U.S. military might to try to change that outcome. Obviously, Reagan did an amazing job in helping to negotiate an end to the Cold War and what was an internal collapse of the Soviet Union that was directed by Gorbachev himself. But I do agree with you. This, Trump's new national security strategy, which was written by Undersecretary of War for Policy Elbridge Colby, is outstanding. It's the most clear-eyed, realist vision we've had certainly since the end of the Cold War. All of the NSSs since the end of the Cold War have been all about democracy promotion and even great power competition. All of those are secondary to what should be our foremost national security priority, which is the assured national survival of the U.S. homeland. And, in terms of homeland strategic defense, securing our borders, and of course, ensuring that, enemy nuclear powers do not interfere in our hemisphere, certainly not with troops or nuclear bombers or nuclear missiles or things of that nature. And, so of course, I strongly support Trump's drive to focus on acquiring Greenland. I think that should be certainly a worthy use of U.S. military force should that be necessary. I don't think it is. I think we could tariff Denmark by 100%, and they would eventually give in and sell it to us for $700 billion, which I think is a fair price. The Panama Canal, I think that's another excellent use of U.S. military force if necessary to drive the Chinese out of our hemisphere, of control of that key waterway. Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, I think those are more questionable in terms of whether U.S. military force is necessary. I'd love to see all of those countries liberated from communist rule. I think it's potentially possible, certainly with Venezuela. Maduro had an offer, a sweetheart offer to do that, where he would step down and allow for democratic elections in return for basically him, being the defense minister and with control of the military in perpetuity. Obviously, that's far from ideal, but it's a much better situation than a communist stranglehold over that country, an oil-rich country that we'd love to be able to develop in terms of strategic resources and mainly just get them out of the grip of Russia and China, which they remain closely allied to. So I think in terms of execution, we haven't really seen it happen yet in terms of accomplishing any of Trump's major objectives, but certainly I welcome the focus. My main concern, of course, is Iran. I think that's the biggest out of focus area. I think that is not consistent in terms of striking Iran with massive strikes that could cause a regional war is not at all consistent with the spirit of Trump's national security strategy.
Yeah, so, staying in the Western Hemisphere, but bringing those actors into the picture, uh, the effectiveness or the effects that have been achieved because of this attack on Venezuela to put them back in their box, so to speak, at least start to anyway. I mean, there's no guarantee because we've left the existing government and the existing strongmen and women in place for the most part in the Venezuelan government, and the president's counting on their fear of our strength and our capability to cooperate. But we have had some really positive effects on the issue, and the issue is Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the bad actors being able to come here and have bases, put their military capability here, their intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capability here, their ability to strike through terrorist attacks. When you're talking about Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iranian proxies, build proxies for the Iranians, terrorist organizations throughout the Western Hemisphere. Those oil sales for the Iranians and oil going to China, all of that has been, in a good way, the effect has been to disrupt that, hasn't it?
Well, yeah. Economically, certainly there's been a huge disruption with the U.S. oil blockade, which is continuing. We heard that Trump and others in the administration talk about how Venezuela had been liberated from communism. They were a friendly government had been installed. Really, none of that's true, unfortunately. We know that because the blockade is continuing. You don't blockade friendly governments; you blockade enemy governments. So Venezuela is clearly still communist. It's still allied with Russia and China. Russia still has a colonel general with 200 Spetsnaz or special forces or Wagner Group mercenaries that are training in Venezuela to fight a counterinsurgency war against the U.S. Should the U.S. decide to invade. Certainly, we could invade. I think it would be a difficult endeavor, but victory would be guaranteed. Counterinsurgency war could last a long time, so it might not be worth military resources, and we'd lose hundreds of casualties for sure. But we've certainly made progress economically in cutting off that lifeline. Of course, mainly to Cuba. Really, it doesn't affect China a whole lot because they only 6% of their oil they get from Venezuela, but Cuba gets almost all their oil from Venezuela. So well, I think that's really, it's been said that Secretary of State Rubio has really masterminded this operation against Venezuela in terms of the oil blockade and the snatch and grab of Maduro and his wife. And the idea is that we can increase the pressure on Cuba to such an extent that they will have to have minimally some kind of democratic reforms. I'm a little bit skeptical whether that can be achieved, but I certainly agree with that objective.
Yeah, I mean, elimination of the two communist governments that remain in the hemisphere. I mean, not even the Nicaraguans have a communist government anymore, but Venezuela and the Cubans primarily are the worst. Eliminating that form of government, I think, is a very appropriate goal since they get almost 100% of their oil from Venezuela. I mean, how would they keep their military operations going, their internal security operations going? You don't just do that stuff without fuel.
Well, I think certainly we could see, the Russians and could be able to supply them potentially the Iranians. We don't have an oil blockade of Cuba at this time, so certainly, there are other adversarial countries that could move in and fill the gap. I haven't seen any evidence that that's happening. We've heard from the Mexican president, who of course is a Marxist, that's anti-American, anti-Trump, who said that she's going to try to fill that, but of course Trump has threatened her, Mexico, not to do that through the Gulf of America. So we'll have to see, but I think Trump's doing the right thing and trying to weaken both Cuba and Venezuela and the communist regimes there. Again, I'm not sure if we should use direct military force to accomplish those objectives.
Yeah, I don't think. I think you're right. I mean, there's no need for us to use direct military force, considering the situation that we now have post this kinetic operation on Venezuela and the continued oil blockade. And we're being successful. I think we rounded up 7 or 8 of these oil tankers so far around the world. And that is going to have an impact. And we got to take a break here, David. But I want to talk about Iran, the Russians, and the Chinese. What's going on in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea right now in the Middle East, because I think it has an impact, and everything we do here has an impact to what's happening and the strength of our enemies or the weaknesses of our enemies over in that part of the world. We'll be right back with David Pine, and we'll have a question from the audience when we come back from the break.
We have a big announcement, folks. It's called Bella Melt. In the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where we've talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel.
MelissaHouseBG.com just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 Fast Action.
It's embarrassing for both Russia and China to abandon their friend so early on. But what they can do is just to show that, hey, we're still here. You know, what can we do? Well, we can't really join you in the actual war. But what we can do is, some posturing. So we could do some naval exercise if you want to for a few hours. That would be nice, right? You'll be happy. And the Khamenei said, fine, we'll do that. Why not? The reason for this is because the Russians are actually already prepared to be more defensive rather than offensive. They got Ukraine to worry about. The Russians are already evacuating from Iran anyway. The actual troops and the security of the Russians have now also announced that they are prepared to evacuate their staff from the nuclear site in Bushehr in Iran, which is towards the southern parts. The Russians are not prepared to directly, at least for now, help the Islamic Republic with the war with the United States. What they're actually doing is protecting themselves. They're running away. The same thing they did in Syria when Bashar al-Assad was falling. So while they're doing let's make an announcement that we're going to do a naval exercise, they are literally withdrawing their troops and their security and their nuclear staff from, for example, Bushehr. Which, by the way, when they've done this, they've also said that we hope that the United States keep an eye on us, basically don't hit any Russians. So I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's not really how it works. If you don't want to get hit, it's probably best for you to leave the country.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday. My guest is former U.S. Army headquarters and staff officer and strategist, David Pine. And David, we got a question from the audience before we dive into this. I'll just say that we mentioned that Russia and China and the Venezuela op, they did not come to the aid of their Venezuelan partners, even though their bases there and their presence there is very strategically important to both countries, in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure you agree with me on that. They were not able to because of the tyranny of distance and their capabilities. Russia's a little bit preoccupied in Eastern Europe and Ukraine right now, but they are playing in the Persian Gulf with this potential Iranian operation. Let's go ahead and take this question from AJ over in our audience before we get too further down this.
Thank you, Colonel. Mr. Pine, it's a pleasure, sir. You gentlemen discussed all the powers that have nukes and all over the planet. My question is, where does North Korea come into this calculus, given the fact that, yes, we have a tendency to brush over them by just calling them the Hermit Kingdom, but Pyongyang is dying to matter. And any thoughts on that? I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, North Korea is notably absent, I think, from the national security strategy. I don't think there's many references in it at all. And North Korea is kind of, since Trump has come back to office, they've stayed kind of quiet. Kim Jong-un, of course, the dictator of North Korea. But North Korea's military and nuclear modernization is continuing at a quick pace. They continue to deploy new nuclear weapons, strategic nuclear weapons, a new nuclear missile submarine, completing at least the sea leg of a nuclear triad with at least a single nuclear submarine that likely has perhaps medium range or intermediate range missiles on it. They've got mobile missiles, nuclear missiles that we haven't had for many years since the end of the Cold War. With perhaps the Pershing IIs and the ground launch cruise missiles that we deployed in Europe in the mid '80s under the Reagan administration. But North Korea would be guaranteed to invade South Korea, I think, if the U.S. were to go to war with China over Taiwan. So still is a major threat. They do have the capability to shut down all of our critical infrastructure with the massive cyber or super EMP attack, I think, much like Iran and, of course, Russia and China. So, we shouldn't take our eye off the ball with North Korea, for sure.
Yeah, the North Koreans are close allies of the Iranians. I mean, their ships make port of call routinely in Iranian ports and vice versa, including oil tankers. Quite frankly, and cargo ships that can deliver and move around large quantities of defensive, weapons, materials, and those kind of things. So we always have to keep them in mind, don't we? But during this pause, when we're shifting carrier groups around and those kind of things, as the Iranians began killing tens of thousands of their citizens because they're protesting the mullahs and that tyrannical government there, and we started moving things around, and the president's threatening them again. The Chinese went into the closed airspace with, I think, 17 equivalents of C-17s all at once, either delivering something or picking stuff up or people up and taking them out. So they are coming to their aid this time.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, there's a tyranny of distance between Russia and China and their ally Venezuela, and I think that's an important lesson for the U.S. to learn about Taiwan. We often think that we can defend Taiwan successfully, but as Trump has stated himself, reportedly, we couldn't win a war with China over Taiwan because Taiwan's 100 times closer. I think it's actually 81 times closer than the U.S. West Coast. But in any case, China has an amazing, a very, very strong home field advantage. We don't have the military bases there. But with regards to Iran, of course, Iran is, practically bordering on, China. It's very close. And Russia, of course, the former Soviet republics are bordering on Iran with, Russian military bases, I think, still present. So, China, I've seen those same reports, and I think China is ferrying in lots of, S-400 style, ABMs and surface-to-air missiles, and we've also I've also heard reports about Russian plans to resupply Iran to significantly expand, double if not even triple the size of their Su-30, aircraft force. Yeah, Russia and China are in a position to arm Iran a lot more than they have already to defend and inflict significant casualties against U.S. forces in the region. We have 50 military bases. Some of our troops have been withdrawn, notably from our biggest air base left, really our only air base left in Iraq. I think that was a wise move. We've drawn down our forces in Syria from 2,000 to 1,000 troops, but we still have, and reportedly we've temporarily withdrawn many, if not all, of our troops from Qatar in preparation for this attack, so that Iranian strikes against our nearby ground bases will incur less casualties. But Iran does have hypersonic anti-ship missiles. They actually have reportedly about 26 submarines armed with anti-ship missiles that are supersonic. The chances of a carrier being hit would be extremely high if we go to war with them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, our ability to counter missiles, our inability to do it effectively 100% of the time, really was shown in the Red Sea operation against the Houthis. I mean, we couldn't shut them down, and that's one of the reasons why I think the president's going ahead with the Trump class battleship in the 21st century version of a battleship, which should bring a lot more firepower and effectiveness to that type of capability that's needed, because aircraft carriers just aren't suited for that. They're just not suited for that. So the problem of Diego Garcia has been in the news a lot recently. And as an airman who has commanded a unit that's operated from there, it is strategically vitally important for us in the Pacific and Southwest Asia and the Middle East to have unfettered access and control of the airfield and the logistics capability that resides at Diego Garcia down in the Chagos Islands in the southern Indian Ocean. What are your thoughts on that? And do you see us allowing the UK to continue to go ahead and give the island away to the Mauritians, who are Chinese proxies?
Yeah, I mean, they may try to give the island away to the Mauritians, but we're not going to give up that base under any circumstance. Certainly not under the Trump administration. Maybe under Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom administration, but that's not happening the next 3 years. So I think we're pretty safe on that end. But certainly it is alarming that the UK and our supposed ally under Prime Minister Starmer is making those kind of concessions to a Chinese ally that could potentially deploy Chinese military forces in that island group.
Yeah. Do you think that the Chinese moves vis-a-vis Iran are deterring us? I mean, there've been a lot, two times in the last 14 days, those that say they're in the know, so to speak, not me, but others have said, "Hey, we're going to thump Iran again because they've killed 30,000 plus of their citizens, and they're re-up and they're trying to get their nuclear expansion capabilities back up and going." Do you think we're being deterred, and that's why this hasn't happened, or is this just part of the standard operations?
Well, I think certainly China mainly is a factor. We've heard reports, and they're not 100% confirmed, that Iran and China and Russia will be holding joint naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman, which borders, of course, on the Strait of Hormuz on the western end, and perhaps other areas of the Indian Ocean. They did confirm such an exercise off of South Africa earlier. I think it was just last month. But we've also heard that there have been chaotic, quote unquote, chaotic discussions ongoing in the White House about whether to execute this attack, because it's very clear that Iran really played nice last time. They launched a lot of missiles, but really a lot of it was propaganda. It was in terms of, they launched the slow missiles at Israel to ensure they could shoot most of them down, just to show that they had the missile capability. And it wasn't until the end of the 12-day war that they really started hitting Israel hard and getting through their military bases and striking targets that I think caused Netanyahu to cry uncle and ask for Trump to, not save Israel, but certainly end the war to prevent very significant Israeli casualties and damage to their critical infrastructure as they were running out of air defense missiles. And of course, we've exhausted a lot of those air defense missiles in defense of Israel, in defense of our ships in the, against Yemen and against the Houthis, a war that, the U.S. Navy, the most powerful Navy in the world, was unable to defeat. We ended up getting to agree to a ceasefire essentially on Houthi terms that they'd offered at the onset of the conflict. These are all, I do think China and Russia to a lesser extent are helping to deter U.S. action in Iran. It's unclear to me whether, the latest reports are true, because we know that Trump tried to pretend that, no U.S. attack was imminent last time around during the 12-day war. I think he said we're going to give him another 2 weeks, and then maybe it was that night or the next day that the strikes on Iran's nuclear targets occurred. So this could be just a way to try to restore operational surprise and make Iran lull them into a sense of complacency that we're beginning withdrawal of our powerful armada in the region.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, David, thank you for joining me today. A great discussion, showing some things that folks aren't thinking about because the average American doesn't see or hear about a lot of this stuff on a routine basis. And we'll just have to wait and see vis-a-vis the United States and Iran to see what's going to happen. But there are things afoot, so to speak. And tomorrow,
always a pleasure.
Yeah, tomorrow is Training Tuesday. We'll have Mississippi State Rep Fred Shanks with us. There's a lot going on in Mississippi. We are attempting to pass and implement the President of the United States school choice program as a big bill here out of the House of Representatives. So it'd be an interesting conversation with Representative Franks. I look forward.
We have a big announcement, folks, something we've been waiting on for several months, and it's now here. It's called Bella Melt. You were on it for just 1 week when you lost 3 pounds.